Imagine you are at a barbecue, the sun's shining, and everything is going great until someone tosses a match into the grill, and suddenly, the flames go wild. Before you know it, the sausages are charred beyond recognition, and the whole situation is a mess. Now, that's basically where we are with Earth. We have cranked up the heat with our fossil fuel habit, and the planet's starting to burn. Enter geoengineering, a potential fix to cool things down. It's like grabbing a giant fan or dumping a bucket of ice on a scorching day. Will these high-tech solutions save the day, or are we gambling with the future of our planet? The stakes are huge, and it's time to ask, are we fixing the problem or just making it worse? Solar radiation management. Let's start with one of the most talked about methods in geoengineering: solar radiation management. Think of solar radiation management as Earth's very own set of sunglasses designed to block out the harsh rays of the sun and cool things down. The basic idea is to reflect some of the incoming solar radiation back into space, preventing it from reaching Earth's surface. Sounds simple, right? Well, in practice, it's a lot more complicated. One of the primary techniques within solar radiation management is called stratospheric aerosol injection, where particles, typically sulfur dioxide, are released into the atmosphere. These particles form tiny reflective droplets that, in theory, would reduce the amount of sunlight that reaches the Earth's surface. This method mimics the natural cooling effect of large volcanic eruptions, such as the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in 1991, which caused a temporary global temperature drop. However, while the idea might sound appealing, it comes with some serious drawbacks. First of all, SAI could potentially damage the ozone layer, which protects us from harmful ultraviolet radiation. Ozone depletion could lead to an increase in skin cancer rates, cataracts, and other health issues. Another concern is that solar radiation management may have unpredictable impacts on global weather patterns. For example, reducing the amount of sunlight reaching the planet could disrupt rainfall patterns, leading to droughts or floods in areas where crops and water supply are already under stress. This disruption could hit developing countries the hardest. Furthermore, even though solar radiation management could cool the planet quickly, it would not address the root cause of climate change: greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, there's a risk that the world might become so reliant on SRM that we delay necessary emissions reductions, essentially putting a band-aid on a much larger, festering wound. Carbon capture and storage. Next on the geoengineering agenda is carbon capture and storage, or as I like to call it, Earth's high-tech vacuum cleaner. Carbon capture and storage technology is designed to capture carbon dioxide emissions from sources like power plants and industrial facilities before they can reach the atmosphere. The captured carbon dioxide is then compressed, transported, and stored deep underground in geological formations. This technology has the potential to be a game changer in the fight against climate change. After all, carbon dioxide is the main greenhouse gas responsible for global warming. By capturing it before it escapes into the atmosphere, we can reduce the planet's carbon footprint and give ourselves more time to transition to cleaner energy sources. However, while carbon capture and storage sounds like a great idea, it faces some significant hurdles. First, the technology is expensive. The infrastructure needed to capture and store carbon dioxide is costly and energy-intensive. In fact, the energy required to capture and compress the carbon dioxide could offset some of the benefits of reducing emissions in the first place. Moreover, the process of storing carbon dioxide underground is not foolproof. If the storage sites leak, the carbon dioxide could escape back into the atmosphere, potentially exacerbating the climate crisis rather than mitigating it. Despite these challenges, direct air capture is gaining traction as a promising carbon capture and storage method. This involves machines that pull CO2 directly from the air rather than from industrial facilities. While direct air capture holds promise, the energy demands and high cost of these machines mean that this approach is still far from being scalable. If we are honest, carbon capture and storage is not going to be a silver bullet. It's more like a small part of a much larger puzzle. The ethics of geoengineering. Now that we have explored the technical side of geoengineering, it's time to face the ethical questions that come with playing God. Geoengineering presents a massive moral dilemma. Is it right for humanity to alter the Earth's climate systems on such a grand scale? On one hand, we have a planet in crisis, with rising sea levels, record-breaking temperatures, and extreme weather events becoming the new normal. On the other hand, meddling with Earth's natural processes could have consequences we can't fully predict or control. Who decides which method of geoengineering is used? And more importantly, who gets to decide when we start using it? The potential for power imbalances in the global political landscape is a real concern. If a powerful nation decides to use solar radiation management without considering the consequences for neighboring countries, it could lead to geopolitical tensions. What happens if one country gets too much sunlight reflected away and faces drought, while another suffers from excessive rainfall? These are the kinds of dilemmas that come with geoengineering. Ethical concerns also arise around the idea of moral hazard. This refers to the risk that geoengineering could act as a substitute for reducing carbon emissions, rather than as a stopgap measure. If we start implementing large-scale geoengineering technologies, there's a chance people might become complacent and stop pushing for the long-term solution, reducing emissions. Geoengineering may be seen as a quick fix, an excuse to avoid dealing with the root causes of climate change, which are human activities like deforestation and burning fossil fuels. Furthermore, the issue of environmental justice cannot be ignored. The impacts of geoengineering could disproportionately affect vulnerable communities, especially indigenous peoples who often live in areas that are directly impacted by changes in the environment. For example, cloud brightening methods might alter regional weather patterns in ways that threaten agricultural livelihoods in parts of Africa or South Asia. There is no doubt that geoengineering raises significant ethical questions we need to grapple with before we take any drastic action. The global debate. The conversation about geoengineering is not just taking place in the halls of science labs. It's happening on the global stage. Countries, corporations, and environmental groups are all weighing in on whether geoengineering is a viable solution or an ethical nightmare. In recent years, there has been increasing pressure for governments to take geoengineering seriously. For example, in 2024, the European Union's scientific advisors called for a global moratorium on solar geoengineering, citing the lack of evidence for its effectiveness and the potential for unintended consequences. Meanwhile, nations like the United States have been actively researching various geoengineering technologies, with institutions like Harvard and MIT leading the charge. However, public opinion on the matter remains divided. While some argue that geoengineering could be an essential tool in mitigating climate change, others warn that we are entering uncharted territory with potentially catastrophic outcomes. As of now, there is no global consensus on geoengineering, and there's a significant debate over whether it should even be considered a legitimate option. Governments aren't the only ones engaged in this discussion. Environmental groups have mixed feelings about geoengineering. Some, like Greenpeace, have raised alarms about the risks of large-scale geoengineering, arguing that it diverts attention from real solutions like emissions reductions and clean energy. Others, however, are more open to exploring geoengineering as a potential way to slow the pace of climate change while we work on long-term solutions. The United Nations has also been involved in discussions about geoengineering, with some member states pushing for further research and international regulations to ensure that geoengineering is implemented responsibly and transparently. With growing pressure from all sides, the question remains: will geoengineering be a necessary evil or a dangerous experiment that we should avoid at all costs? If you have enjoyed diving into the wild world of geoengineering with us, don't forget to smash that like button. Let's keep the conversation going. Hit subscribe so you don't miss out on more thought-provoking topics that'll make you think, laugh, and maybe even question everything. Thanks for watching, and remember, keep cool, but don't overdo it.